my research topic surrounds movie franchise fandoms and how the modern landscape of social media shapes their tendencies, attitudes, and relationships. Within my topic, there are things related to the creator-fan relationship, a sense of ownership over the property or movie, and the implications of the vitriolic social media age we live in. With that being said, my research question is deduced to how are network publics, specifically Twitter, enabling and shifting the tendencies of movie franchise fandoms. My curiosity for this topic kind of stems from the fact that I've always been a Star Wars fan for as long as I can remember, even more so after Disney bought the company back in 2012. So naturally, I try to stay in the loop about the movies and surrounding discussions, which happens a lot through Twitter. After the release of The Last Jedi, I was kind of baffled by the ensuing discourse, not just from a pure film criticism perspective, but this vocal divide and bickering through the social media platform. Overall, I'm most fascinated by how fandoms impact the brands in which they discuss online, and how Twitter and other social media can put a direct link and added pressure between fans and creators. For those unaware, The Last Jedi was the third Star Wars movie released under the Disney brand. It was released back in December of 2017 and was written and directed by Rian Johnson, who is kind of going to be a pivotal part of discussion, as a lot of the criticism of the movie and his subsequent interactions with fans online is channeled through his Twitter account and fans kind of targeting him and other cast members to overtly criticize the movie and the brand itself, which kind of shows a more transparent and direct creator-fan relationship, which we'll get into more in a second. Because my topic and research question were so specific to Twitter, the way I curated original data was mostly through the Twitter advanced search. Basically, I was looking at any tweets directed at Rian Johnson and other fans interacting with other fans, and basically kind of getting a general consensus of how this conversation around this movie has not only evolved but gone into many different tangents and kind of criticisms and different ways that people interact, whether it be talking about the movie on a tweet that's not even talking about the movie itself, and kind of seeing how the affordances of Twitter impact the conversation but also define it. So going back and sifting through tweets all the way before this movie came out back in December of 2017, you can kind of see how polarizing it is just by the representation of extremes and not really a middle ground over, oh, this movie was good, but I didn't like this, and this. It's usually like, oh, I hated this movie, Rian Johnson, you ruined my childhood, you ruined Star Wars, I'll never forgive you, or I thought this movie was groundbreaking for Star Wars, and which is a really interesting kind of clash of contexts and perspectives, most notably in the negative response to the movie is a crowd who I'll just call the Remake The Last Jedi crowd, which is kind of circumvented through a Twitter account called Remake The Last Jedi, and this came into the conversation I think in June or July of this year, so months after this movie was actually made. There was kind of this outcry on social media that because the movie was so bad in their opinion that it needed to be remade, and quote, the people in power think fans who dislike The Last Jedi are an irrelevant minority of the basement dwellers who are just keyboard cowboys and will never actually affect real change. If you don't want them to win, spread hashtag Remake The Last Jedi and let your voice be heard. And what's fascinating about this is the sense of entitlement, almost ownership of the property, kind of being bolstered through Twitter, is not something that's new in the broader sense of, oh, I didn't like this, so we the fans should have more control. That's not new in the Star Wars community. For those familiar with the prequel movies in the early 2000s, which were created by the original Star Wars founder George Lucas, fans had many things to say about those movies and why they were bad, but I think this ultimately, the reaction to The Last Jedi is so polarizing and amplified, because Twitter provides this immediacy, this transparency to these movies' production, who's making them, and this is more or less supported by scholarly arguments, not necessarily up to date with all the implications of Twitter, but through online networks and fandom as it's evolved over the online space the past couple decades. Most notably is Nancy Baum's research. She took a look at how music fans built the internet, and I think in a lot of ways draws parallel to the film community, especially on Twitter. Quote, fans remade participatory consciousness and established the terms for how online music culture was going to work. And I think this is very similar to how the culture of talking about movies online works today. Also, for my final paper, I'm taking a look at Boyd's research over remix culture and context collapse, and also a scholar by the name of Morton Bay, who wrote an article called Weaponizing the Haters, The Last Jedi, and Strategic Politicalization of Pop Culture Through Social Media Manipulation. So to kind of sum it all up and code my findings, I would say first and foremost the immediacy of Twitter creates a more transparent and accessible relationship between the creator and the fan. However, this creates more external pressures for the creators, and also as fandom evolves and populates online, this creates more attachment and expectations for properties.